In June 2001, a man entered an elementary school in Ikeda, Japan, and in roughly 5 minutes killed 8 children and injured 15 other people. But this was not a crime without warning. 2 years earlier, the same man had poisoned tea at another elementary school. Authorities knew his name. Doctors had his records. His family had asked for help. Yet, he was free to walk into a classroom filled with children. This is not only the story of the Osaka school massacre. It is the story of every warning that was documented, every system that passed responsibility away, and the changes Japan made only after 8 children were killed. On Friday, June 8th, 2001, Ikeda Elementary School was beginning like any other morning. It was a prestigious school attached to Osaka Kyoiku University. More than 700 children were inside. Parents had dropped them at the gate. Teachers had started lessons. The youngest students were in the south building, in first and second grade classrooms. At around 10:15 in the morning, a 37-year-old man named Mamoru Takuma entered the school. He did not attempt to conceal his identity. He entered through a window and moved through the building toward the youngest classrooms. What happened next lasted only a few minutes. 8 children were killed. 13 children and 2 teachers were injured. Staff members, including the vice principal and a teacher, eventually managed to restrain him despite being injured themselves. The victims were 7 girls aged 8 and 1 boy aged 7. Their names deserve to be remembered as more than a number: Yuki, Mayuko, Yuka, Ayano, Maki, Takahiro, Hana, and Reina. Reina had once written about wanting to become a singer. She admired Utada Hikaru and had written about the comfort she found in the song Distance. After learning about Reina, Utada Hikaru rearranged the song as Final Distance, dedicating it to a child she had never met. But before Japan could understand how to mourn the children, it had to confront another question. How had Mamoru Takuma been free at all? Because by June 2001, he was not unknown to the system. 2 years earlier, in March 1999, Takuma had worked as a maintenance employee at Itami Elementary School, around 6 kilometers from Ikeda. During that time, he put a tranquilizer into tea in the teacher's room. 4 staff members became ill enough to require hospitalization. He admitted what he had done, but the legal outcome was not prison. He was found not criminally responsible because of mental illness. For many people, that decision would later become one of the most painful facts of the case. A man had committed a serious act of violence at a school. It had been documented, he had admitted it, and he was released. That was the first major warning, but it was not the only one. Takuma had a long record of violent behavior, unstable employment, criminal allegations, psychiatric contact, and confrontations with people around him. He had been arrested for sexual assault. He had been fired from jobs after violent incidents. He had assaulted people during disputes. His family had reportedly spent years trying to find help. The important point is not to treat his childhood as a simple explanation for what he later did. Violence is not inevitable. Trauma does not turn someone into a killer. The important point is that by adulthood, there was a growing record of behavior that should have triggered stronger intervention, supervision, or accountability. Instead, responsibility seemed to move from one institution to another. Police had encountered him. Employers had encountered him. Medical professionals had encountered him. The courts had encountered him. His family had encountered him. but no one system appeared to take responsibility for the overall pattern. 16 days before the attack, Takuma admitted himself to a psychiatric hospital, reportedly for depression. He left the next day. His father later said that the family had asked for assistance for years. There were records, there were warnings, there were chances to act. Then came the morning of June 8th. Takuma had a court appearance scheduled that day for an earlier assault case. Before going to Ikeda Elementary, he had reportedly tried to start a fire at his apartment. When that failed, he bought a knife and drove toward the school. Investigators later said he had expressed resentment toward the children at Ikeda, seeing the school as a symbol of privilege and stability that he believed he had been denied. The school was not heavily secured in the way schools are today. At the time, open gates and accessible buildings were normal in Japan. Schools were designed around trust. Visitors could often enter without going through the type of screening, locked entrances, cameras, and sign-in procedures that later became common. On that morning, the gates were open, and a man with years of documented warning signs was able to reach the youngest children inside the building. After the attack, Takuma was taken into custody. His statements were confused and contradictory. At different points, he made claims that did not match what had happened, but he also made clear that he expected to be arrested. He reportedly said that he wanted to receive the death penalty. He did not attempt to build a defense around innocence. He did not show meaningful remorse to the families affected by the attack. The court had to determine whether he understood what he had done and whether he could be held criminally responsible. In the earlier tea poisoning case, he had been found not criminally responsible because of mental illness. This time, psychiatric evaluations reached a different conclusion. The court found that he understood his actions and was capable of criminal responsibility. He was convicted and sentenced to death in August 2003. In September 2004, Mamoru Takuma was executed at Osaka Detention House. The speed of the execution was unusual in Japan, where people sentenced to death often remain on death row for many years. For some, the sentence brought a sense of legal finality, but it did not answer the question at the center of the case. Why had the warnings failed? The attack transformed school security across Japan. Within weeks, schools began locking gates during class hours. Security cameras appeared at entrances. Visitor sign-in systems became more common. Many schools hired guards or introduced new supervision measures. Schools began running emergency drills for intruders and violent incidents. Classroom doors that had once remained open were more often kept closed or secured. These were major changes in a country where schools had long operated on the assumption that children could move freely and safely through their communities. Every year on June 8th, Ikeda Elementary School holds a memorial for the children who died. For survivors, teachers, and families, the impact did not end when the attacker was arrested. Trauma remained. Questions remained. Grief remained. The case also forced Japan to confront difficult questions about mental health care, criminal responsibility, family support, public safety, and what happens when different systems each see only one part of a person's risk. No single missed warning caused the attack. There was no one open gate, one doctor, one court decision, or one police report that explains everything. But that is what makes the case so disturbing. pattern had been visible for years. A man had already committed violence connected to a school. He had been in contact with medical and legal institutions. His family had tried to seek help, and still, on one Friday morning in June 2001, he was able to enter an elementary school in Ikeda. 8 children were killed in minutes. The changes that followed made Japanese schools more secure, but they came after an unimaginable loss, and after every warning had already been written down somewhere. This was the Osaka school massacre, one of the deadliest school attacks in modern Japanese history, and the morning that changed how an entire country thought about school safety. If you want more carefully researched and respectful true crime documentaries, subscribe. The next case explores another tragedy, where the warning signs were visible long before the crime.